Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery and watched the stars bend around them as they dropped out of quantum fold drive. The year was 2157, and this was humanity's first trip beyond their own solar system using the new, faster-than-light technology. Jake had been chosen to lead this historic mission because of his calm nature and quick thinking during crisis situations. The massive space station, called Nexus Prime, appeared on their screens like a giant metal flower floating in the darkness. It was 3 times larger than any human structure ever built and glowed with strange blue lights that pulsed in rhythm. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez pressed her face against the observation window and made notes in her electronic pad about everything she saw. As the ship's xenobiologist, she would be the first human to study alien life forms up close. Commander Pete Johnson checked the weapon systems one more time, even though they came in peace. His military training made him cautious about first contact situations. The Discovery carried no offensive weapons but had strong shields and fast engines in case they needed to escape quickly. Dr. Lisa Carter worked at her science station and scanned the alien station with every sensor they had. The readings were unlike anything in human databases. Voice came through their communication system speaking perfect English with a strange musical quality. The alien said they were expected and should dock at Bay 7 immediately. Jake wondered how they knew English so well when this was first contact. Amy suggested that advanced alien races might have been watching human transmissions for years without making themselves known. The docking procedure went smoothly despite the alien technology being completely different from human designs. As the airlock opened, Jake led his team into the station and got their first look at alien architecture. The corridors were tall and curved with walls that seemed to shift color as they walked past. Strange symbols floated in the air like holographic signs pointing in different directions. They were met by 3 different types of aliens in a large circular chamber. The first group looked almost human, but had pale blue skin and large black eyes that seemed to stare directly into their souls. Amy whispered that these must be the telepathic Zephyrians she had read about in the pre-mission briefings. The second group was much taller, with thick gray skin and 4 arms each. Pete recognized them as members of the militaristic Craven Empire from intelligence reports. The third group appeared to be made of pure energy contained in transparent suits that hummed with electrical power. These were the Ethereal Collective. A Zephyrian stepped forward and spoke without moving its mouth. The words appeared directly in their minds, which made Lisa feel dizzy and confused. It welcomed them to the Galactic Council and explained that humanity would now be part of the greater galactic community. The aliens' thoughts felt cold and mechanical, as if humans were being processed like cargo rather than welcomed as equals. The Zephyrian continued by explaining that all species in the galaxy had specific roles assigned by the Council based on their abilities and development level. Humans would be classified as a low-tier mining species and given rights to exploit resources in Sector 7 on the outer rim of the galaxy. Jake tried to object, but the alien dismissed his concerns with a wave of its hand. Amy noticed that the other aliens were studying them carefully, as if they were specimens in a laboratory rather than intelligent beings deserving respect. When she tried to ask questions about their cultures and histories, the Craven representative grunted that such information was restricted to higher-tier species only. The ethereal being simply flickered its energy patterns in what might have been amusement or contempt. Dr. Carter took detailed scans of the aliens while pretending to adjust her equipment. She discovered that human brain patterns were completely different from the other species they encountered. Where alien thoughts seemed to follow predictable pathways, human neural activity jumped around in chaotic patterns that made no logical sense to outside observers. The meeting concluded with humanity being given a data package containing their new assignment and basic galactic law information. They were told that a council overseer would visit their colonies within 1 year to ensure compliance with regulations. Any resistance to council authority would result in immediate military intervention by Craven forces. As they walked back to their ship, Pete whispered that something felt wrong about the whole situation. The aliens treated them like children. who needed guidance rather than equals who deserved respect. Lisa agreed and said her scans showed that human creativity and problem-solving abilities were actually superior to what they had observed in the alien species. Jake made the decision to return to Earth immediately and report their findings to the Colonial Administration. As the Discovery pulled away from Nexus Prime, Amy looked back at the station and wondered if humanity had just made a terrible mistake by revealing themselves to the galaxy. The aliens seemed to have everything planned out already, as if they had been waiting for humans to develop space travel just so they could be assigned their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. The journey home took 3 days and gave the crew time to analyze everything they had learned. The galaxy was not the welcoming place they had hoped to find, but rather a rigid system where powerful species controlled weaker ones through fear and manipulation. Humanity would need to be very careful about their next moves if they wanted to maintain any independence in this new galactic order. 5 years had passed since Captain Jake Morrison first met the Galactic Council at Nexus Prime. Now he commanded a small fleet of ships that moved between the dozen human colonies scattered across Sector 7. The mining worlds were supposed to be worthless according to alien surveys, but human engineers had found ways to extract valuable resources that the aliens had missed completely. Tony Walsh wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched. The new mining equipment worked twice as fast as the alien designs. His engineering team had modified the machines to work in ways the original builders never intended. Where alien technology followed rigid programming, human modifications allowed the equipment to adapt to changing conditions and solve problems on its own. Dr. Lisa Carter stood in her laboratory on New Boston Colony and studied the data from 5 years of research. Human neural patterns were not just different from alien brains, but actually superior in many ways. Aliens thought in straight lines, while humans could jump between ideas and make connections that seemed impossible to logical minds. This chaos was actually humanity's greatest strength. Colonial Administrator Susan Green received the latest demand from the Galactic Council through their Craven enforcer. The message was simple and threatening. Human colonies were producing too much wealth, and the Council wanted 70% of all resources as tribute. The amount was 10 times higher than what other species paid and would leave humans with barely enough to survive. Susan called an emergency meeting with the colonial governors and military commanders. Captain Morrison attended by video link from his flagship along with Admiral Kate Thompson, who had been promoted to oversee human defense forces. They all agreed that the tribute demand was designed to crush human independence and reduce them to slave labor for the alien powers. The decision was made to refuse the tribute payment. Susan sent a formal response to the Council stating that humans would pay a fair share like other species, but would not accept discriminatory treatment. The reply came within hours and contained only 2 words in the Craven language that translated to "prepare yourselves." 3 weeks later, Craven warships appeared in the New Boston system. Captain Roy Bennett commanded the small human defense fleet of only 6 ships against 12 Craven heavy cruisers. The aliens sent a surrender demand, giving humans 1 hour to submit or face destruction. Bennett responded by powering up his weapons and moving his ships into attack formation. The battle began badly for the humans. Craven ships were larger and had stronger weapons that could punch through human shields with ease. But Bennett had studied every piece of alien technology data available and noticed something important. Alien battle computers were programmed to fight predictable enemies who followed standard military tactics. Bennett ordered his ships to split up and attack from random directions, using maneuvers that made no logical sense. His pilots flew their ships like they were racing through asteroid fields rather than fighting a space battle. The Craven computers could not predict what humans would do next, because human actions seemed completely crazy to alien logic. Pilot Maria Santos dove her fighter directly at a Craven cruiser and fired her weapons at point-blank range before spinning away at the last second. The alien ship tried to track her movement but failed because no rational pilot would attempt such a dangerous maneuver. Other human pilots followed her example, and soon the Craven formation was in chaos. The turning point came when Lieutenant Dan Foster used his ship's computers to hack into Craven communication systems. Instead of trying to break alien encryption, he simply fed random noise into their networks that confused their coordination protocols. The Craven ships began firing at each other by mistake as their targeting systems received conflicting data. When the battle ended, 7 Craven ships were destroyed or disabled while humans lost only 2 fighters. The surviving alien vessels retreated immediately and sent urgent messages to their high command. Captain Bennett broadcast his victory across human space, and the news spread to other colonies within hours. The psychological impact of the victory was enormous. For the first time in galactic history, a low-tier species had defeated Craven military forces in direct combat. Intelligence reports suggested that other suppressed species were watching human actions with great interest and beginning to question whether the Council was truly invincible. Dr. Carter received data from the battle and made another important discovery. When Maria Santos interfaced with captured alien equipment during the fight, she had somehow improved its performance by 30%. Human intuition allowed them to use alien technology in ways its creators never imagined possible. The Galactic Council response was swift and harsh. Trade restrictions were imposed on all human colonies, and other species were forbidden from having contact with humans under penalty of military action. But the restrictions had an unexpected effect because they forced humans to become more self-sufficient and innovative. Engineer Tony Walsh led teams that developed new technologies to replace alien imports. Human creativity flourished under pressure, and within months they had created solutions that were often better than the alien originals. The mining colonies became manufacturing centers that produced everything humans needed to survive and thrive. Intelligence officer Don Foster continued monitoring alien communications and discovered disturbing patterns in the data. The Galactic Council had used the same tactics against dozens of other species throughout history. Any race that showed signs of independence was quickly crushed or absorbed into the existing power structure. The evidence suggested that the galaxy had been stagnant for thousands of years because the ruling species prevented any real innovation or progress. They maintained control by keeping everyone else dependent on their technology and following their rules. Humanity's refusal to submit was the first real challenge to this system in recorded history. As news of human defiance spread through underground channels, representatives from other oppressed species began making secret contact with colonial governments. They wanted to know if humans would help them resist council authority, or if this was just a temporary rebellion that would be crushed like all the others. Captain Morrison met with these secret ambassadors on a neutral asteroid mining station and listened to their stories of oppression and control. He realized that humanity had stumbled into something much larger than a simple trade dispute. They had become symbols of hope for species across the galaxy who dreamed of freedom but lacked the courage to fight for it themselves. Admiral Kate Thompson stood in the war room on Earth and studied the holographic display showing human colonies. Across Sector 7, red markers indicated worlds under direct threat, while yellow ones showed colonies preparing for possible attack. The Human Defense Alliance had grown from a small patrol force into a real military organization with ships and soldiers spread across dozens of star systems. The alliance had formed naturally as more colonies declared independence from Galactic Council oversight. Captain Morrison had been promoted to Fleet Admiral and now coordinated defense efforts from his mobile command ship. His experience with alien tactics made him invaluable in training other commanders who would face similar battles. Dr. Carter made her most important discovery while studying brain scans from human pilots who had successfully interfaced with alien technology. The data showed that humans were persistence hunters during their evolution on Earth. This background created neural pathways that allowed them to keep trying different solutions until something worked, even under extreme pressure. Other species in the galaxy had evolved as specialists. Zephyrians developed telepathy, Cravens became warriors, and Ethereals mastered energy manipulation. But humans remained generalists who could adapt to any situation by thinking in new ways. This flexibility was completely alien to species that had followed the same patterns for millions of years. The Ethereal Collective decided to test human defenses using their most advanced weapon. Chief Information Officer Ryan Clark detected the cyber attack as it began penetrating human computer networks. The alien programs were sophisticated and used pure, mathematical logic to break through digital defenses that should have been impossible to crack. But Ryan had learned something important from studying human-alien technology interfaces. Human computer systems did not operate on pure logic like alien networks. Instead, they used intuitive programming that could make creative leaps and find solutions that seemed impossible to mathematical analysis. Ryan assembled his best programmers and launched a counterattack that confused the ethereal hackers completely. Instead of trying to match their mathematical precision, the humans fed artistic patterns and music into the alien systems. The ethereal computers could not process creative input and began making errors that opened backdoors into their own networks. The cyber battle lasted 3 days and ended with human programmers gaining access to secret ethereal databases. The information they discovered was shocking and confirmed what many had suspected about the true nature of galactic civilization. The Galactic Council maintained power through systematic suppression of any species that showed signs of independent thinking. Engineer Michelle Young led the team that analyzed captured alien military data and found critical weaknesses in Council fleet formations. The aliens relied on predictable tactics that had worked for thousands of years against species that thought like they did. But human unpredictability could exploit these weaknesses in ways no previous enemy had attempted. The first major test came at Centauri Junction, a strategic location where several major space routes intersected. The Galactic Council assembled a combined fleet of over 300 ships from all 3 ruling species. Admiral Thompson faced them with barely 100 human vessels that were smaller and less heavily armed than the alien warships fleet. Admiral Morrison joined Thompson for the battle and brought his most experienced captains. Captain Roy Bennett commanded the fighter squadrons while Maria Santos led the reconnaissance units that would provide targeting data. The human fleet looked pitifully small compared to the massive alien armada, but their crews were confident in their unconventional tactics. The battle began with the aliens forming their traditional attack formations that had dominated space warfare for millennia. Zephyrian command ships used telepathy to coordinate movements while Craven battleships provided heavy firepower, and ethereal vessels jammed human communications. It was a textbook display of superior alien military doctrine. Admiral Thompson surprised them by splitting her fleet into dozens of small groups that attacked from every direction at once. Human ships moved like a swarm of angry insects darting in to strike weak points before disappearing into the chaos of battle. The alien formation began to break apart as commanders struggled to track so many independent targets. Captain Bennett's fighters used a tactic he called ghost dancing, where they would appear on alien sensors for just seconds before vanishing again. The pilots flew their ships through debris fields and asteroid clusters that alien computers considered too dangerous for combat operations. But human reflexes and intuition allowed them to navigate hazards that would destroy computer-controlled craft. The turning point came when Maria Santos discovered that alien command ships were vulnerable during telepathic coordination sessions. She led a strike team directly at the Zephyrian flagship while its crew was mentally linked to other vessels. The surprise attack destroyed the command ship and severed the telepathic network that held the alien formation together. Without central coordination, the alien fleet began making mistakes and attacking their own allies by accident. Human programmers had infiltrated their communication systems during the battle and were feeding false information that caused even more confusion. Within hours, the mighty Galactic Council armada was retreating in complete disorder. The victory at Centauri Junction was broadcast across the galaxy through captured alien communication networks. Species that had been suppressed for centuries watched in amazement as their supposedly invincible rulers were defeated by a young race that most had never heard of before. Ambassador Helen Brooks received the first official contact from the Vorthan Communes, a species that had been nearly extinct after challenging the Council 500 years earlier. The Vorthons had survived by hiding in the galaxy's outer regions and maintaining their independence through careful isolation. Now they wanted to know if humans would accept them as allies. Captain Alex Turner commanded the diplomatic mission that made secret contact with other potential allies. His ship visited hidden bases and forgotten colonies where species that had refused to submit to Council authority still maintained their freedom. The network of resistance was larger than anyone had imagined, but had been too afraid to act until humans proved that the Council could be defeated. Trade Director Nancy White established new commerce routes that bypassed traditional Council-controlled trade networks. Human colonies began trading directly with resistant species, exchanging raw materials for advanced technology and cultural knowledge. The economic impact weakened Council control over galactic commerce and gave hope to species that had been economically dependent on their oppressors. The psychological effect of human victories was spreading throughout the galaxy like a virus that the Council could not contain. For the first time in thousands of years, ordinary beings were questioning whether the established order was natural and inevitable, or simply a system of control that could be changed. Dr. Carter's research teams worked with allied species to develop new technologies that combined human creativity with alien knowledge. The results were innovations that surpassed anything the galaxy had seen before. Medical treatments, energy systems, and communication networks emerged from these collaborations that benefited everyone involved. As human influence grew, the galaxy began to change in ways that frightened the ruling powers. Species that had been enemies for centuries started cooperating against their common oppressors. The rigid hierarchy that had maintained peace through fear was breaking down as more beings chose freedom over security. News of human victories traveled through the galaxy faster than the Galactic Council could suppress it. Ambassador Helen Brooks received dozens of secret messages from species that had been quiet for centuries but were now showing signs of rebellion. The rigid order that had controlled galactic civilization for 10,000 years was beginning to crack under pressure from the human-led resistance. The Vorthon communes became humanity's first major ally when Captain Alex Turner successfully negotiated a formal alliance treaty. The Vorthons had learned to hide their activities from Council surveillance and possessed advanced stealth technology that could make entire fleets invisible to alien sensors. In exchange for protection, they offered to share their knowledge with human engineers. Turner's diplomatic team worked carefully to build a network of allied species without alerting Council intelligence services. They met in abandoned star systems and used coded communications that looked like ordinary commercial traffic. Each new alliance brought additional resources and knowledge that strengthened the growing resistance movement. The Galactic Council realized they were facing their first serious threat in recorded history. The Zephyrians increased their telepathic surveillance efforts, but found that human minds remained largely unreadable. Worse, humans seemed to be developing some kind of mental resistance that protected them from psychic manipulation completely. Dr. Lisa Carter's medical research team discovered the source of human immunity to telepathic control. Human brains operated on chaos patterns that created natural barriers against external mental influence. But more importantly, they could extend this protection to other species through medical treatments that altered neural chemistry in subtle ways. Dr. Kevin Moore led the team that developed the first anti-telepathy treatments for alien allies. The procedure was simple and only required a single injection that modified brain chemistry for several months. Species that had been mentally controlled for generations suddenly found themselves thinking clearly for the first time in their lives. The psychological impact was devastating to Council authority. Craven soldiers who had been conditioned to obey without question began deserting when they realized their loyalty was artificially induced. Ethereal technicians discovered that their logical thinking patterns had been manipulated to serve Zephyrian interests rather than their own species' needs. Trade Director Nancy White expanded human commerce networks to include dozens of liberated species. The new economic system operated on principles of fair exchange, rather than the tribute-based hierarchy that had enriched the ruling powers for millennia. Colonies that had barely survived under council taxation began prospering as they traded freely with human partners. The liberation movement spread to entire sectors as species learned they could resist council authority successfully. Admiral Kate Thompson coordinated military support for rebellion movements, while being careful not to expose her forces to unnecessary risks. Human advisors taught alien resistance fighters how to use unconventional tactics that confused traditional military responses. Fleet Admiral Morrison received intelligence reports showing that Council forces were retreating from contested regions rather than face human-trained resistance groups. The aliens had never encountered enemies who fought without following predictable patterns, and their military doctrine had no answers for guerrilla warfare tactics. The Zephyrians decided to use biological weapons when conventional military force proved ineffective. They released an engineered virus designed to target human neural tissue and cause madness in anyone infected. The pathogen spread through several colonies before Dr. Carter's team could identify the threat and begin developing countermeasures. Dr. Moore's medical research proved crucial in defeating the biological attack. Human immune systems were more adaptable than alien designers had anticipated and could develop resistance to artificial pathogens much faster than expected. Within weeks, human colonies had natural immunity and were producing vaccines for their alien allies. The failed biological attack backfired spectacularly when human scientists reverse-engineered the virus and used it to create treatments that enhanced mental resistance to telepathic manipulation. Species across the galaxy began requesting the new medicine that could free them from thousands of years of psychic control. Captain Roy Bennett led Operation Starbreak, a massive coordinated campaign that liberated 12 star systems simultaneously. Human forces worked with local resistance groups to overwhelm council garrisons before they could call for reinforcements. The speed and scale of the operation shocked alien military commanders, who had never faced such widespread coordination. The liberation campaigns used human innovations in communication technology that allowed instant coordination across vast distances. While aliens relied on slower-than-light messages for security reasons, humans had developed quantum entanglement networks that provided immediate contact between allied forces without fear of interception. Engineer Michelle Young's research teams worked with Vorthan scientists to create new ship designs that combined human adaptability with alien stealth technology. The resulting vessels could appear and disappear at will, carrying weapons that used unconventional principles to penetrate traditional defenses. The psychological warfare aspect of the rebellion was as important as military victories. Every successful human operation was broadcast across the galaxy using captured alien communication networks. Species that had never dreamed of freedom watched their oppressors being defeated by beings they had been taught to consider primitive and worthless. Intelligence Officer Dan Foster discovered that the Galactic Council was losing control of information flow throughout their territory. Human hackers had infiltrated communication systems so thoroughly that Council orders were being intercepted and modified before reaching their destinations. Military commanders received contradictory instructions, while civilian administrators found their databases corrupted with resistance. Propaganda. The economic impact of the rebellion grew as more species stopped paying tribute to council authority. Trade Director White established alternative currency systems that allowed liberated species to conduct commerce without using council-controlled financial networks. The ruling powers found their wealth draining away as their economic base collapsed. Captain Turner's diplomatic efforts created a formal alliance structure, called the Liberation Coalition, that included over 50 species by the end of the year. Each member contributed their unique abilities to the resistance effort while receiving protection and economic support from the growing network of free worlds. The coalition developed its own military doctrine based on human tactical innovations, adaptive for different species' abilities. Aquatic races provided underwater assault capabilities, while flying species offered air superiority support. The diversity of the alliance created strategic options that no single species military could match. Dr. Carter's research into consciousness and telepathy yielded another breakthrough when she discovered how to disrupt the mental networks that connected Zephyrian society. The technology could sever telepathic links permanently and force the aliens to rely on normal communication methods like other species. As the rebellion spread across the galaxy, the once mighty Galactic Council found itself controlling less territory each month. Their responses became increasingly desperate as traditional methods of suppression failed against enemies who refused to follow established patterns of resistance. The galaxy was changing in fundamental ways that could never be reversed. Species that had been separated by artificial barriers for thousands of years were working together toward common goals. The rigid caste system that had defined galactic civilization was breaking down as beings discovered they had more in common with each other than with their supposed superiors. Communication networks that had once carried only official council propaganda now buzzed with messages of hope and coordination between resistance cells. The galaxy was finding its voice after millennia of enforced silence, and that voice was calling for freedom from the tyranny that had held it captive for so long. The Galactic Council's authority collapsed sector by sector as the human-led rebellion spread across the known galaxy. Communication networks that had once carried orders to trillions of beings fell silent as Council loyalists retreated to heavily fortified core worlds. The galaxy had never been so quiet, but it was the silence of a storm gathering rather than peace. Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison coordinated liberation efforts from his mobile command base, moving constantly to avoid Council attempts to destroy human leadership. His fleet had grown from a few patrol ships to hundreds of vessels donated by allied species or captured from enemy forces. Each ship was crewed by mixed species teams that represented the new galactic order emerging from the rebellion. Captain Alex Turner commanded diplomatic missions to species that remained neutral in the conflict. Many were afraid to choose sides, because they had seen what happened to races that opposed Council authority in the past. Turner's job was to convince them that this time was different because humans had proven the ruling powers could be defeated permanently. The three ruling species faced their greatest crisis in galactic history. Zephyrian telepaths found their mental networks disrupted by human technology, while Craven military forces encountered resistance tactics they could not counter. The ethereal collective watched their logical systems fail against enemies who operated on principles that seemed completely irrational. Dr. Lisa Carter's research team worked with scientist Paul Anderson to make their most important discovery about the quantum nature of consciousness itself. They found that telepathic control required specific quantum frequencies that could be disrupted using technology based on human brain patterns. The breakthrough promised to end psychic domination forever. The quantum consciousness disruptor was built in secret facilities hidden throughout human space. The device would broadcast interference patterns that would sever telepathic connections across multiple star systems simultaneously. If the theory was correct, it would free billions of beings from mental control in a single moment. Admiral Kate Thompson prepared the largest human fleet ever assembled as intelligence. Reports showed the three ruling species were forming a desperate alliance. Every available ship was recalled from patrol duties, while allied species contributed their own vessels to the growing armada. The final confrontation was approaching. The Council's response was predictable but massive. They gathered over 2,000 warships from across their remaining territory, representing the largest space fleet in recorded galactic history. Zephyrian mineships provided psychic coordination, while Craven dreadnoughts brought overwhelming firepower, and ethereal vessels contributed advanced technology. Captain Roy Bennett led the elite strike forces that would target Council command ships during the coming battle. His pilots had trained for months using captured alien vessels to understand enemy weaknesses and develop new attack patterns. They knew the odds were against them but believed in their cause and their abilities. The great fleets converged on humanity's home system as the Council decided to end the rebellion by destroying Earth itself. They wanted to send a message to the galaxy that challenging their authority would result in complete annihilation. The psychological impact would crush resistance movements. Across hundreds of worlds, Earth's orbital defenses had been upgraded with the best technology available from human research and allied species contributions. Weapon platforms used hybrid designs that combined human creativity with alien engineering principles. Shield generators protected critical installations, while communication networks prepared to coordinate the planet's defense. Admiral Thompson positioned the human fleet between Earth and the approaching Council Armada, knowing she was outgunned by a factor of 20 to 1. But numbers had never been the deciding factor in human victories. Their advantage lay in unpredictability and the willingness to attempt tactics that seemed impossible to logical analysis. Fleet. Admiral Morrison took personal command of the defense coordination center and prepared to implement the most complex battle plan in human history. Every ship captain knew their role, but was authorized to improvise as conditions changed. The human approach to warfare had always been flexible rather than rigid. The battle began when the Council fleet entered the outer solar system and demanded Earth's immediate surrender. Thompson's response was to launch every fighter and bomber at her disposal in a massive swarm attack that confused alien targeting systems. The small craft moved like a cloud of metallic insects. Striking from unexpected angles, Captain Bennett's elite squadrons penetrated deep into the Council formation using stealth technology provided by Vorthan allies. Their mission was to reach the command ships and disable the telepathic coordination networks that held the alien alliance together. Success would throw the enemy fleet into chaos. The fighting spread across the entire solar system as human forces used every available advantage. Pilots flew through asteroid belts and cometary debris that alien computers considered too dangerous for combat operations. Human intuition and reflexes allowed them to navigate hazards that would destroy automated systems. Maria Santos led fighter squadrons in attacks on ethereal vessels, using her unique ability to interface with alien technology to turn their own weapons against them. Her pilots learned to think like their machines and convince enemy systems to accept human control codes during the confusion of battle. Dr. Carter monitored the quantum consciousness disruptor from her laboratory on Earth as the device charged to full power. The process required careful timing because the window for maximum effectiveness would last only minutes. Everything depended on activating the weapon when Council forces were fully committed to telepathic coordination. The turning point came when Bennett's strike force reached the primary Zephyrian command vessel and began their attack run. The massive mine ship was protected by layers of psychic barriers that had never been penetrated by enemy forces. But human pilots operated on mental patterns that telepathic defenses could not predict or counter. As the strike force engaged the Zephyrian flagship, Dr. Carter activated the quantum consciousness disruptor at precisely the right moment. The device broadcast interference patterns across the entire star system, targeting the specific frequencies used for telepathic communication and control. The effect was immediate and devastating to Council forces. Telepathic networks that had coordinated alien society for millennia were severed instantly. Zephyrian crews found themselves unable to communicate with each other or coordinate their actions. The psychic bonds that held their civilization together simply disappeared. Craven soldiers who had been mentally conditioned for absolute obedience suddenly questioned their orders for the first time in their lives. Many ships stopped fighting as crews demanded explanations for why they were attacking beings who had done them no personal harm. The rigid military discipline that made Craven forces effective began breaking down. Ethereal vessels lost their logical coordination networks and began operating as individuals rather than collective units. Their precise formations dissolved into chaos as each ship followed its own interpretation of battle conditions. The mathematical precision that made them dangerous was replaced by confusion and hesitation. The psychological shock of losing telepathic control created panic throughout the Council fleet. Species that had relied on mental manipulation for social order found themselves experiencing true individual consciousness for the first time in their evolutionary history. Many simply could not function without external guidance. Admiral Thompson seized the opportunity and ordered all human forces to press their attack while enemy coordination was disrupted. Her ships moved through the alien formation like wolves attacking a scattered herd, targeting command vessels and communication nodes to prevent the Council from regaining control. The battle that was supposed to demonstrate Council dominance became a rout as their forces fled toward the edges of the solar system. Some ships surrendered immediately while others simply powered down their weapons and waited for human forces to accept their capitulation. The mighty armada that had come to destroy Earth was destroyed itself. In the aftermath of victory, Admiral Thompson established humanitarian aid stations for surrendering Council forces. Many alien crews were struggling with their newfound mental freedom and needed medical assistance to cope with individual consciousness. Human medical teams worked around the clock to help former enemies adjust to their liberation. The quantum consciousness disruptor had done more than win a single battle. Its effects spread beyond the solar system through quantum entanglement networks, disrupting telepathic control throughout the galaxy. Billions of beings experienced mental freedom for the first time in their species' recorded history. The silence that followed the Battle of Sol was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. For 10,000 years, telepathic networks had carried the thoughts and commands of the ruling powers to every corner of known space. Now those networks were gone, leaving billions of beings to think their own thoughts for the first time in their species. History. Ambassador Helen Brooks worked tirelessly to establish communication with former Council species who were struggling to understand their newfound freedom. Many had never made independent decisions and needed guidance on basic concepts like personal choice and individual rights. The transition from mental slavery to liberty was proving more difficult than anyone had anticipated. Admiral Kate Thompson supervised the formation of rescue fleets that searched for Council survivors throughout the solar system. Many alien crews had simply shut down when their telepathic connections were severed because they did not know how to function as individuals. Human medical teams provided emergency care while psychologists helped them adjust to independent consciousness. The political situation across the galaxy changed overnight, as species that had been controlled for millennia suddenly found themselves free to make their own choices. Some worlds descended into chaos as beings who had never experienced conflict began fighting over resources and territory. Others embraced their liberation and immediately began reaching out to the human-led alliance. Dr. Lisa Carter established research stations where former Council species could learn about their own natural abilities without telepathic enhancement. Many discovered they possessed talents and intelligence that had been suppressed by their mental controllers. The Craven species proved especially adaptable once their artificial aggression was removed through medical treatment. Captain Alex Turner led diplomatic missions to worlds that had been isolated since the battle. His job was to explain what had happened and offer membership in the new galactic community that was forming around principles of individual freedom and species equality. The response varied greatly depending on each world's particular history and culture. Trade. Director Nancy White coordinated the massive humanitarian effort required to feed and supply billions of beings who could no longer rely on Council distribution networks. The old system had been centrally controlled and collapsed when telepathic coordination ended. New trade routes had to be established quickly to prevent widespread starvation. Fleet. Admiral Jake Morrison worked with Allied military commanders to maintain order during the transition period. Some Council loyalists had retreated to fortified worlds in the galaxy's core regions and were attempting to rebuild their power base using traditional military force. These holdouts represented a continuing threat to the new order. The formation of the Galactic Liberation Alliance was announced at a massive gathering on the neutral world of Harmony Station. Representatives from over 300 species attended the founding ceremony, where they voted to adopt a charter based on human concepts of individual rights and democratic governance. Captain Roy Bennett commanded the defense forces that protected the Constitutional Convention from attacks by Council remnants. Several assassination attempts were made against human leaders and Allied delegates, but the security measures held firm. The new government would not be stillborn due to terrorist actions by the old regime. Dr. Kevin Moore's medical research teams made breakthrough discoveries about the long-term effects of telepathic control on different species. Many aliens suffered from a condition similar to depression as they struggled to develop individual personalities for the first time. Treatment programs were established to help them through the psychological adjustment. Engineer Michelle Young led the reconstruction efforts that rebuilt galactic communication networks using technology that could not be controlled by telepathic manipulation. The new systems were designed to be transparent and democratic, allowing all species to participate equally in information exchange. Intelligence Officer Don Foster coordinated the hunt for Council war criminals who had escaped during the collapse of their government. Many high-ranking officials had fled to hidden bases where they were attempting to restart their program of galactic domination. These fugitives needed to be captured before they could reorganize their forces. The economic recovery proceeded faster than anyone had expected as liberated species threw themselves into productive work with enthusiasm they had never felt before. Creativity and innovation flourished when beings were free to pursue their own interests rather than serve the needs of their mental masters. New technologies and art forms emerged daily. Maria Santos established the Galactic Pilot Academy, where beings from different species learned to work together in mixed crews. The program was designed to break down the barriers that had separated species for thousands of years and create the foundation for true interspecies cooperation. Dr. Carter's research into consciousness led to the development of mental protection technology that would prevent any future attempts at telepathic domination. The devices were small enough to be implanted surgically and would alert their users to any external mental influence. No species would ever again lose their freedom to psychic manipulation. The trials of council leaders began 3 years after their defeat, with proceedings broadcast across the galaxy so all species could see justice being done. The testimony revealed the full extent of the crimes committed over millennia, including the systematic suppression of hundreds of potentially advanced civilizations that had been destroyed to maintain the status quo. Captain Turner negotiated the peaceful surrender of the last council stronghold when its defenders realized they were completely isolated and surrounded. The Zephyrian leadership agreed to submit to trial in exchange for protection from angry mobs of their former victims who demanded immediate execution. The reconstruction of galactic civilization took decades but proceeded steadily as species learned to govern themselves and interact peacefully with their neighbors. The rigid caste system that had defined social relationships was replaced by merit-based cooperation where individuals were valued for their contributions rather than their species of origin. New Horizon Station was built at the galaxy's center as a symbol of the democratic principles that now governed interspecies relations. The massive structure housed the Alliance Council where representatives from all member species met to discuss common concerns and coordinate joint projects. Human architectural principles influenced the design to ensure no species felt disadvantaged by the environment. Admiral Thompson established the Galactic Peace Corps, a military organization dedicated to protecting the freedom of all species from any future attempts at domination. The force included volunteers from hundreds of worlds, who had sworn to prevent the return of tyranny in any form. Their ships patrolled space lanes and responded to requests for assistance from threatened communities. Trade Director White oversaw the development of economic systems based on fair exchange rather than tribute extraction. The new commerce networks allowed even the smallest species to participate in galactic trade and benefit from technological advancement. Prosperity spread to regions that had been deliberately kept poor under the old system. The Cultural Renaissance that followed liberation produced art, literature, music, and philosophy that reflected the experiences of beings discovering their own identities after millennia of mental slavery. Human concepts of individual expression inspired creative works that would have been impossible under telepathic control. Education systems were established to teach young beings about their rights and responsibilities as free individuals. The curriculum included history lessons about the dark period of council, Rule to ensure future generations would recognize and resist any attempts to restore authoritarian government. Democracy required informed citizens who understood the value of their liberty. The galaxy that emerged from the silence was fundamentally different from what had existed before. Where once there had been rigid hierarchy and enforced conformity, now there was diversity and creativity. Species that had been enemies for centuries learned to work together toward common goals, while those that had been oppressed found their voices and contributed their unique perspectives to galactic civilization. The final scene of transformation took place on New Horizons Station as human children played alongside young aliens in the station's central park. Their laughter echoed through corridors that represented hope for a future where no being would ever again bow to artificial authority. Different species had learned to see each other as individuals rather than stereotypes, creating friendships that transcended ancient prejudices. Humanity's rise had indeed turned the galaxy silent by ending the telepathic chatter of the old order. But from that silence had emerged something far more valuable than the noise of tyranny. The galaxy had found its voice of freedom, and that voice would ring throughout the stars for generations to come as beings work together to build a civilization based on justice, equality, and the unlimited potential of free minds working in harmony.